My name is Abdul Rahman Sibahi, most of you know me, and I'm honored to be here today. The elevator pitch of my thesis is that it's about the process of architecture and how we can automate it, but this is more, there's more to it than that. Like, that's how I usually sell it to people, but there's a lot of research going into it. So a lot of my research about how different architects throughout the previous generations tackled the problem of the process of architecture and how we can bring it to the next level and how we can automate it. A lot of work like Revit, like BIM, helped us go on with that, but there's a lot to it in this. So the process of architecture, does it really need like capital A architect? Could it be automated, and would it be a viable business if just like gave forms to people and did it to this? A lot of my research in undergrad and my pre-SAIC research was about how to make that, about the business of housing and how to design houses and design residential work. So there's a bit of it to that. So that's context. So this is a website, like if you were to design a house, what's the first thing you'd do? Most architects would tell you that you would go to an architect. But in fact, like there are a lot of websites online that offer to clients and real estate agents a way to design floor plans and design houses without the need for an architect. Without, like, as you can see here, it says, as a real estate professional, you work with floor plans every day, and now you can do it the easy way through a website. Other websites, online architects, so to speak, they offer plans for sale. You just choose the criteria you want, how many bedrooms you want, how many bathrooms you want, and you just select one of them. And if you want to add to it, you can go to the custom design option on top, and they will do it for you. Back home in Saudi Arabia, which my experience is, architects are a luxury. Most people don't go to architects to design houses. They go to contractors, and these contractors are the one who subcontract the architect, and the usually architect is someone who has a set of plans on the side, and they just dispense whatever's most necessary. Architects also face a problem, is that people don't know what we do. People, like, a lot of people have asked me, what do you guys do exactly? Nobody understands what architects, how architects are useful in the process. And some, like even in the United States, some research has done that only 28% of houses were designed by architects, like capital A architects, so to speak. Another problem from the client's point of view is that architects usually tend to put their own ideas and put their own wants and needs before the clients. And like a lot of my colleagues in undergrad have this problem that they think they're Frank Lloyd Wright incarnate, and they resent the clients for wanting what they want. They reject clients that don't match with their philosophy. One more problem is, and this was phrased by several architects throughout, one of them is, the name comes from Yona Friedman, and it's the average person fallacy, is that when architects design for a lot of, people, like 4 people or 500 people, they can't deal with all the 400 people at once, with the 500 people at once. So instead they create a fictitious average person, which they design for instead. And what you end up with is 500 dissatisfied customers. The thing is, people actually know what they want. We're not in a position to dictate what they like and what they don't like. People know that they want, for example, a house, a living room that overlooks the garden, or a kitchen that's connected to the dining room. They know that fact, and they don't need us to tell them that. Even like architects aside, even real estate agents use similar criteria. What's the school district you want? What's the location you want? And based on that input, they can just choose a house for you from a database. Okay. Previous art on how to get the architect out of the architectural process has been done before, and with varying degrees of success from theory and practice. One of the things I like to talk about is Hassan Fathi and the Gurna experiment in Egypt. And the whole project was set up to fail from the beginning, because it was about the Egyptian government wanted to dislocate villagers from one village to the next because of I don't know what the word is, but like some of the ancient Egyptian artifacts, they were stealing it, and they want to relocate them, so cut off their source of profit, so to speak. So they hired, and Egypt was in the middle of a war at the time, so they hired Hassan Fathi, who was already famous for designing and building extremely low-cost buildings based on traditional building materials. Now this is what was finished from the project of New Gorna, and even though the project, like you can see from the plan, that it was very modular and very systematic, each house's individual design was based on that family's needs. He gave them the lot, and he saw where they arranged themselves and built walls according to that. And the portion of the village that was finished is the part on the top, not the part of the bottom, and the part of the top was the original plan. Hassan Fathi is credited for like bringing back ancient techniques, but a lot of his philosophy on how to involve practice and how to involve the residents in the design was not remembered as part of his legacy, and which is a fact I find unfortunate. Another architect who tackled the same problems is Yonah Friedman, and he had like this idea. This is the average person fallacy, and he was a lot focused on the ideas of circuits and on the process of information from the clients to the design to the house to the client himself. And this is how he illustrated much better than I did the average person's fallacy. And the sketch before that, he shows that if the architect was to talk with each one of these individual 500 people, it would create what he called a jammed circuit. So Friedman instead suggested that the architects should construct a repertoire, which is analogous to a restaurant's menu, where each item has like a full description and a warning that basically translates to the cost of the item on the menu. And he worked out through a lot of the details, and like looking through this like past couple of weeks to prepare for the lecture, I realized I should read the book again because it's gonna help me with a lot of stuff in my thesis. So this is how Friedman's like showed his ideas might show up in practice. Like you have a grid from an existing infrastructure, and the clients choose which squares they want and which squares they can't choose, which are the article by the no, and so on. And that creates enough variety for every client to have what they want, but all within the existing system, the infrastructure. Another architect that has attempted to reinvent the process of architecture is Christopher Alexander and pattern language. And pattern language, I think, is a very simple, effective idea that has been very badly sold by its author, because it relies on patterns that we architects deal with day to day. We all know how to design an entrance. You create some sort of space between the outdoor and the indoor. There's a transition. You all know where to position the security office. And all these patterns are relationships between objects. For example, you can see in this chart how the mini pattern language on the left describes all the houses on the right, despite they're all being very different houses and very different sizes, but they all have the same logic to them. They all have the same relationships. And because every pattern is a set of relationships, and these relationships can connect to each other, so in effect you get a tree of these patterns. You get a pattern language. Now, pattern language is such a powerful idea that there's an entire industry that's effectively built on it, which is software development. Software developers talk about patterns like we talk about styles. Like it's everything they talk about. This is, for example, from Wikipedia page on the abstract factory pattern, technical aside. It just creates a set of relationships between different objects to achieve a desired result. It's exactly the same way that Christopher Alexander proposed his language to be used. And these patterns are exchanged between software developers. They are discarded, they're cataloged. Even the first wiki page was about cataloging design patterns. One software developer took it upon himself to take the idea back to its roots. His name is Bruno Posel. I might be butchering the name. And he created basically a genetic algorithm that evaluates house designs based on Christopher Alexander's patterns and generates either houses or entire cities with the language. And so this is one of the houses, and you can see the score of the subsequent generations and how they're being valued from one generation to the next. And the funny thing is, he didn't put any geometric constraints on the project other than Christopher Alexander's patterns. And a lot of the patterns that came up were analogous to the patterns that came up from traditional architecture, which is something the developer Posel thought was very interesting. Another project I came across earlier this semester is something called the housing agency system by these guys. And they make the observation that, as you can see here, 72% of houses are designed as is without any reference to the clients. And here you have that only 28% of houses were designed involving an architect or a licensed design professional. And this is in the United States. So what they propose is that instead of having an architect sit down with the clients and do that, they would have one model that essentially fits all, and you can extend it and twist it as much as you need to fit the client. And all these variations differ in things by size, by how many cars you have, by the budget, by the site itself, and they can stretch the house literally to fit the site. This is one of my friends sent me this project. It's a simple software project by a university club in Montreal, in Polytechnique Montreal. And basically what they do is that they ask people to draw on a piece of paper a house and put tags where the different functions should be. And with the helper app, you can just see how the house looks like with the paint, with the furniture, with the functions you chose. Something that's kind of related, that if we were to take this to the next level, this is in Switzerland, and I don't know if I can control it from here. And basically it shows you a robot that's essentially building a wall by its own. And in theory, if you could marry the technologies that have been shown before, like the ideas that have been done by these previous examples, with this technology, you could have essentially houses that build themselves by the client's wish without involvement by any technicals. I mean, this is still in the future, and you can still see them feeding the Adobes to the robot. Okay, where it is. There are other examples of data-driven design. There's a lot of design based on market research. Mac mansions, for example, are based on market research, essentially. A lot of the big firms like SLM are designing skyscrapers based on energy studies, based on views, based on data, and not because of some aesthetic quality. Aesthetic weighs into it, but not as much as before. So this is my 2 cents to solve the solution. It's a very simple app so far. Given the context I started with, a lot of my work has been on designing this small house. And ideally, this is just a mock-up. Ideally, it would look something like this. You'd have the input on the left side. You'd input what the client usually tells the architect, this is my plot, this is my family, I like open spaces, etc. And the result would show up on the right side, either in text or in drawings. And there are 2 ways to control the output. One of them is the input by the client, and one of them is the criteria. And this could essentially be a plugin that could be added or taken from the program based on what the architect or the deployer of the app wants. Something like the building code, how much sunlight I prefer, etc., location of the program. And design standards can include stuff like trends, maybe. Both of these feed into the building program, which determines essentially the number of rooms, the size of rooms, etc., and the different room types. And while this is not usually something done by the architects, not a service done by the architects, at least not in the United States, it's a conversation that we're often a part of. And if we could have something that could at least create a reasonable program to help our clients reach a better decision, that would be valuable in and of itself. But after creating the rooms and creating the program, remains the problem of how to solve this program into a site, and how to make sure all the relationships are satisfied. And I've been trying since the beginning of semester 2 approaches. One of them is genetic algorithms, which is essentially throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. And another algorithm I'm calling pull push, which is just simply shuffling the rooms around until they all sit neatly next to each other. And I don't have a way to show it here because it's still very abstract, and this is how the essential circuit or loop would look like. The client would put their input in, and if they want some extra controls, like if they want a pool, if they want an L-shaped house, they could they could pay for that. That could be a way to monetize, I guess. And all that info would go into the house, and the house would essentially generate that list of rooms, and they would be adjusted, and then given back to the client as a finished plan. Some of the criteria, some of the options that could be chosen, like for example, and this is pretty much the only example I have, is whether the client prefers a family life or a more private life in the bedroom. So in the top 2 houses, like you can see a bigger living room and smaller bedrooms, and that's for a family that, say, emphasizes collective life and family life. But the right side of it shows a house that has bigger bedrooms where people prefer to spend more time alone than collectively, and no judgment. And the other one is whether a certain family prefers indoor spaces or outdoor spaces to hang out in, which is both that's viable. If you want, I could show you this is pretty much the end of the presentation, and I could show you the simple app that I have been working on. Last semester, okay. And there you go. Okay, so it simply asks simple demographic questions. How many kids do you have? What's the number of the family? Etc. The plot size, which say 60 by 70. And it takes about 2 minutes to reach a solution. And it does that solution and just simply lists the rooms and their locations. And that's basically the end of it. So, no, not yet. I've been working on it. No. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. So if you guys have any questions, I have the mic right here.
Thank you for your presentation, Abdul. I think there's two things kind of working out here, and I've only come to a couple of the thesis student presentations, but I think you're building on some of the work of architects that have been working on questions like this before. I think I mentioned to you in passing about Bernard Rudofsky's Architecture Without Architects, which is really talking about a kind of vernacular discussion about architecture. And so obviously there's a lot of suggestions in there, but maybe not as many prescriptions, right? I think the great irony of this presentation is just how much you're thinking about this as an architect, and trying to render the architect out of the process. Yeah. Like, I think your assertions are interesting. I think that they're part of a very contemporary question. But just like the question that Tristan brought up, like, is there a graphical output? I'm looking for that too. Maybe that's just because I'm an architect, but
Oh, I'm working on it.
good, good. I know you have a couple of weeks left for thesis, but yeah, no, I think the question for me is about quality, and it's a qualitative question, and you can really attempt the quantitative analysis, which is an incredibly important one, and we talk about this quite a lot in practice in terms of value engineering, et cetera, et cetera. But I do feel like there's a very qualitative aspect to what we do, and there's an expertise specifically about lifestyle that I would hope certain architects should have. And that's always a tough one to quantify. So I don't know, how do you describe to dealing with the kind of qualitative? You've set up a very simple binary for your inputs that has no culture associated with it. So how do you start to account, in your opinion, how does this grow to truly become like an algorithm that accounts for that? Try to answer.
One of the things, that's one of the questions that have been asked for me since the beginning. I actually started working on this. And how do you define qualitative? And the answer I usually give that nobody ever is happy with is that the clients know what they want, and if you give them 4 walls and a roof, they usually decorate it the way they like, whether we like it or not. And I mean, there are a lot of examples of architects who design houses for the clients, only for the clients to say wreck the architect's vision. But the qualitative, I mean, what do you mean by qualitative aspects? Do you mean something like the light that goes into the...
You just said breaking down qualitative decoration, and that is a dichotomy that's really normative. I would say most architects, no, not most, a lot of architects think about it like that, and a lot of people do too. Lifestyle is not just about decoration, so it's a tough question. I don't think there's an answer.
What I'm saying is like some qualitative things are like essentially subjective. Like you want fresh air to go into the room. No, that's not subjective. That's subjective. But some of them are subjective, and architects have no right to dictate that on the client. I mean, that's arguable. You don't agree with that, but like that's my view. And there could be a way for that to be input into the program, but it's beyond the scope I'm working on at the moment. That's the app done, by the way.
Yeah, Abdul, I'll just say,
Sorry.
I don't know.
Sorry, you can if you want.
My voice is really bad, so I'm going to use this. There are a lot of people working on qualitative assessments, and I can introduce you to a bunch of people, former MIT people, many of whom are actually Portuguese, and they've come to this through studying CISA and starting to look at how you can describe CISA's work through genetic algorithms and things like that. So there's actually a bunch of work out there for that, which I don't know if you know about or not, but I'm happy to introduce you to. I think Jana Friedman is very useful for you. Another author that you should look at is a guy called Tom Heath. It's a very dry book, but I think it's called Method in Architecture. And he actually talks about like human flexibility too. And so I think flexibility would be one part of this that would be just an important facet of your future thinking. So Tom Heath. And you can write to me and I'll send you the reference, more direct reference if you like.
That would be great. Thank you very much.
Hi. So you were saying kind of along the lines of like working with a client, maybe their vision would be imposed on whatever this program suggested. So I'm kind of wondering then, what is the purpose of the program if the client is reforming the structure to be whatever they want? Like, what is this really doing? What is it contributing?
That's a tough question.
That's actually an easy question. I put your slide. Can you go back to your slides?
Okay.
Is this like dynamic? Can we have like a discussion?
Sure, yeah. But could you speak into the mic so it's...
Can you go back to the slide? Yeah, this one here. I think this is actually really fascinating. And it actually leads to my real question for you, which is what is the... In a model like this, if we assume that the world is becoming more and more automated, And if we think that some portion of design, be it for an automobile, be it for a telephone, be it for a circuit board or a microprocessor, or for a building, or for whatever it is going to be performed by an algorithm, what is the new role of the architect? And so I actually think that little box with the architect and the criteria in there is probably the most interesting part well, I'm not saying the rest of your thesis isn't interesting, but I think that's a really interesting question for you to start thinking about. And so maybe one of the ways you could start to think about this, I don't know if this is the right way or not, but might be to say, in response to the question that was just asked, well, what does the architect bring to the equation? I think actually there may be two ways of going about answering that. One, you could say, well, in many instances, there's a lot of stuff that we know we bring to it, but there's a lot of things that people don't know about. But there's certainly like a technical expertise. Yeah. Like, without doubt, architects are trained for years upon years to develop a technical expertise. And then on top of that, then there's like a qualitative expertise, which is like a cultural aspect of what we do as architects, how we think about space and the articulation of material in space. Yeah. So I don't know, this is maybe an abstract answer to your question or maybe a part of a discussion, but there must be some technical material in there which is the contribution of the architect.
Well, but the other thing is what does it offer the client in a sense?
What does the program, what does the algorithm offer the client that the architect, like the person who's programming it, doesn't? One thing that offers the clients that architects simply can't match is the iterative process. The client essentially can put different options, like in the control options, they can put different things they like and see different results that come from the same inputs in much faster and much more efficient way than the architect can do it. And even if the architect himself was using this tool, like as a way to hide the client from it, and it'd still be a faster way for the architect himself to come up with different solutions than just like agonizing about it for 2 days until they reach something that kind of fits, but not really. That's a great answer. Thank you.
One of the things you said is the way the client comes in and like messes things around. But what if you just built that in the first place instead of going through the whole rigmarole of the input and output of do something like the inland steel building, which is just an open plan with just a structure and then some clips where you can put walls that can change as your family and personal needs change. And then when you sell it, then you don't need to do this whole rebuild it. It can be flexible for any buyer.
That's one option.
Friedman actually talks a lot about that, and that's a lot of the justification for Jana Friedman's work. So, I think there are interesting people to look at there. I'm talking way too much. But Tom Heath would be really also, I think you really should read his book on method and architecture.
Anyone? Okay.
The gender binaries, I just wanted to point out that maybe that could be potentially problematic.
Well, I'm designing for the Saudi market in a sense, and people there usually separate the boys and the girls in bedrooms. That's all there is to it.
Cool.
Okay.
I got the microphone again. I just want to say there was something that was gestural towards what Andrew was saying about the qualitative and the cultural aspects, where, like you mentioned the Saudi market, you did mention grandparents, which is kind of not assumed in the Western housing. So there is that beginning of that gesture towards individual culture that may not be normative to most architects. So I thought that was really interesting and something maybe to push.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.